Okay, so hi everyone. We're continuing with studying Beruria, and I have a small little thing which we haven't looked at in depth. That I came across two sources. So let me share my. Whoops, I haven't shared it yet. 1 second. Share screen. PowerPoint. So last week I read this particular quotation, but I decided to start from here again, and then we'll look specifically at something we touched on but didn't really understand, and maybe I didn't even understand it at the time that we touched on it. So so there are feminists who explain Beruria's aggression, which is compensation for isolation, right? She's a woman and she's not welcome in the masculine world, so she has to make up for it, which is really interesting because we've also shown ourselves by looking at we've seen that some of the rabbis themselves are very aggressive. In other words, so it's not so much that she has to compensate for her isolation, but that's the style. In other words, so if she wants to make it in that world, she herself has to be aggressive, right? So she makes herself emotionally tougher than any male rabbi. I'm not sure if that's true, but whatever, in order to prove her virility. In other words, to show that she's as good as anyone else. She's virile, she's masculine, all right? And because women are traditionally considered to be weak-minded by some of these rabbis, and and there are some very famous statements about it, she has to prove her strength in this hostile male environment. So an example of that might be this particular quotation. So, and we saw it again, but we didn't look at it before. So Beruria, by the way, all of this is from Noam Sion's book. Beruria demeans these rabbinic insiders immoderately in a way similar to her degradation of a heretic who asks her a question. By the way, the Min and somebody who I know very well, I actually studied with her for a very long time, Michal Ben Asher. She has another name as well, but I can't think of her name right now. Anyway, does anyone know the name that you can help me with it?
It's on the tip of my tongue. I've studied with her.
Michal Bar Asher.
It'll come to me.
Okay, anyway, so she's written quite a few books about it, and in her classes, she made it clear that, and argues that whenever it says min, which is a heretic, it really refers to Christians, okay? So a certain min said to Beruria, it is written, sing, barren one, you did not bear children. You did, and this is a quotation from Isaiah, right? Rani Akara lo yalada. Okay, Roni Akara, sing, O barren one, Shalo yalada, who did not bear children, right? The word children is not mentioned, but who did not bear, right? Why, if she did not bear a child, should be sing? And singing usually is a Roni Akara. Roni is singing with joy, right? Roni is, by the way, Roni is also the name of girls. It's a very popular name of girls today. And Ron means not just to sing, but was joyful singing. So she replied to him and she said, you fool, look at the end of the verse. Now notice how she speaks to him. She calls him, you fool. Is that necessary to call him a fool? Why not? Why does she need to address him that way? Look at the end of the verse where it says, for the children of the desolate shall be more than the children of the married wife, says God. Okay, and this is, all of this appears in the Talmud, in Brachot 10a, in the Babylonian Talmud, okay? So what is she basically saying here? Because the end of the verse says the children of the desolate one, right? The children of the desolate one shall be more than the children of the married wife. So what's the message here?
That they took the quote out of context, and then that the barren woman will eventually have more children than.
Okay, either have more children or shall be more. It's not clear, all right? All right. Maybe shall be more, she'll rise
Oh,
up, right?
okay, yeah, more
But I think the way
righteous.
she's using it, I think, Sue, you're right. I think the way he's using it, or she, rather, um, she's using it is taking the quote out of context, okay, which is Isaiah 54, 1, okay? So, Noam Tzion writes, the heretic is perhaps a scholarly Christian. Now, according to Michal Bar Asher Siegel, I think is her name, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So according to Michal, by the way, Michal is not simply a wonderful scholar, amazing scholar, but she's also one of the vice presidents at Ben Gurion University and very much into women's politics and also in general. She's an amazing scholar. And if you could find any tapes of her teaching, it's really an amazing experience. But she didn't write this. This is okay. So according to her, she would not put the word perhaps. She probably would take out the word perhaps, right? According to her, he is a scholarly Christian who reveals the Old Testament. By the way, we don't call it the Old Testament. We call it we also don't call it the Tanakh. When you go to a conference, does anyone know how we refer to the Old Testament, including how non-Jews today in the scholarly world refer to?
They call it the Hebrew Bible, I think.
The Hebrew Bible, right? In other words, it's not politically correct anymore to say the Old Testament, okay? Just so you know. And so you really have to say the Hebrew Bible. I don't know why when this was published, okay? And it's Zafka, a Jew, who's saying it, who reveres the Old Testament as a typological foreshadowing of Christ, like Justin Martyr in his dialogue with Trypho, the rabbi. Okay, so in other words, this is a person who perhaps by talking about or who knows the Hebrew Bible very well, right, is perhaps someone who is thinking along the lines of what will happen with Christ. By the way, I'm trying to understand why he says this. Maybe because Christ doesn't have children. I mean, I don't really know, right? But anyway, there were dialogues. The rabbis had dialogues with Christians, and don't forget, the early Christians were probably Jews, right? Many of them were Jews, the very early ones. And the cross between them was really, okay. Now, the heretic was presumably trying to entrap Beruria with an interpretive question about women's issues, giving birth, and to highlight the rabbi's inadequate mastery of biblical, right? So in other words, the person who's asking the question perhaps is trying to force her to address a woman's issue. Okay, why? Because she's a woman. Okay, but Beruria returns the heretic's subtle jibe with a ferocious retort. Okay, she proves him to be ignorant about exegetical methodology and rebukes him for holding to a mistaken theology. In other words, the theology perhaps that if you don't have children, you should be unhappy, or not understanding that in the rabbinic tradition, it's possible to show by use of text that somebody who should be unhappy can also be happy at the same time. Okay. She then explicates her own oblique reference and continues her reproof. But what then is the meaning of sing? A barren one who did not bear, right? And then she goes on to say, sing, community of Israel who resembles a barren woman, okay, this is after the destruction, for not bearing children, who are, like you, destined for Gehenna, for hell.
Oh,
Okay? That's the punchline. So she's not really, right? She's not really addressing his question, but she manages at the same time to tell him, you are a fool, and B, you don't understand our system. And to add it to all, right, you are going to hell. Any other way of reading this? Okay, that's how I'm reading it. I'm not sure if that's the correct reading, but we'll see in a minute. So in other words, her mockery and sarcasm compel her interlocutors, is that how you pronounce it? To give in, but her tone leaves a bitter aftertaste for those men who must submit to this domineering woman. Now, here's some commentary on it, and then we're going to look at a different commentary afterwards. This is a footnote, if I'm not mistaken, right? Yeah, I think this is a footnote from Sion. You want to read this, including the footnote? This is the footnote, I think. Sue, you want to read it?
sure. The heretic may be ridiculing Israel for its barrenness after its temple was destroyed and its people decimated. How can it sing God's praises when its historic fate shows it has been rejected and abandoned by God, her husband? If the heretic here is a Christian, the question may suggest, how can Israel sing when God has rejected her in her stubbornness? An expression of a supersessionist theology.
Okay, let's stop here just for 1 second. So to understand, I'm not sure if all of you understand what a supersessionism is. Does anyone want to explain that if you understand what it is? Okay, the idea is that, and again, once you really have to be very careful about this. I actually experienced this at a conference once. Supersessionism is the idea that Christianity, because it has superseded Judaism, is superior to Judaism, right? And I, at a conference once, was exceedingly critical. It might even have been with this particular passage, but not about Beruria, but about something. I don't remember what it was. Extremely critical of the Jewish tradition. Unfortunately, I was the only Jewish person in the room, and I felt, that I had to defend myself. But then I said, just off the cuff, without even thinking, that I said, you may not be able to be critical of the Jewish tradition but I can, because it's my tradition, right? So in other words, what we're allowed to say, but perhaps the scholars who are Christian are much, much careful. And to be politically correct, they have to really turn down this supersessionist theology, but certainly not in the early days. Okay, so go on, But
Beruria replies that in the competition between a woman who is married and one who is temporarily abandoned, it will be in the future the one who is desolate who will outproduce the one now married.
Okay, so Sue, you were right with what you said before. Okay. By the way, okay, the question is, what does it mean outproduce? Does it mean actual children or whatever? Okay, go on.
In any case, even now, Israel can already sing with gratitude for not producing offspring like this foolish heretic.
Okay, and then it goes on to his Hevruta.
My Hevruta Yossi Gordon argues, the theological point is that the Christian is correct, that Israel is now barren, but better to be temporarily barren than to bear benighted progeny destined for eternal suffering. This is a brilliant, nuanced, and complex repudiation.
Okay, do we all understand this? Does anyone have any questions about that? I think this is really cool. If you don't understand something, don't hesitate to ask. Okay, now before we go on to the next next point, I want to share with you an article by not the whole article, but an article by Marjorie Lehman, who's written about, you could see that I have done a search for the word barren in her article. All right. We will be looking extensively at her article later because she actually, her article is looking at Beruria together with Yentl, okay? And we will be looking at her article later. However, right now, what we have here is her comments on the same passage, and it comes right after she talks about the marriage that singers Yentl wishes for but can never have. Okay, so keep that in mind that this is the context. Toby, would you like to read in the very next passage?
Yeah. In the very next passage in Brachot 10a, Beruria engages in an open conversation with a male non-family member, indeed an outsider. The danger in this interchange seems to hover around his sectarian status as a min, possibly a Jewish Christian, and not around the dangers of male-female interactions. The Talmudic editors have this min recite to Beruria the verse, "Sing, O barren, you who did not bear," thus intimating that she had no children and equating her on a subliminal level with the barren women of the Bible. Beruria reacts by telling the man that he is a fool for not reading the end of the verse. For more are the children of the desolate than the children of the married wife. Her acumen is on display to the non-rabbinic world as she expounds this verse aloud, explaining that Israel will birth more children than Rome, and that the barren woman, rather than describing her personally, is an image to which Israel is likened only because Israel does not birth sons for Gehinnom, hell, as Rome does. Nevertheless, by linking Beruria with an image of barrenness, the passage dissociates this female scholar from motherhood. Beruria crosses the gender divide to speak authoritatively and learnedly with both an insider, her husband, and an outsider, a min. Yet, despite her erudition, and unlike the barren mothers of the Bible, who succeed in reversing their fate, Talmudic literature refrains from any reference to Beruria as a mother who takes upon herself the responsibility to teach her own children or encourage their study as the rabbis expected of mothers. Beruria challenges the boundaries of what it means to be female, not only by virtue of her scholarship and her interactions with men, both inside and outside of marriage, but in not being referred to as a mother.
Okay, so we will soon see her as a mother, but right now we haven't looked at that yet. Okay, so what is Marjorie? I know Marjorie, she's a full professor at JTS and she's an amazing scholar, but I know her when she was a young lady. Her parents came on sabbatical to Omer for a year, and I played tennis with her parents, and I really knew her as a young woman. I had no idea she was going to go on to be this, important scholar at the Jewish Theological Seminary. If you ever can sit in on a class with her, I imagine it would be a wonderful experience. So I feel I can call her Marjorie. Anyway, with respect. So what is Marjorie saying here? I think it's really very interesting. Actually, Marjorie, you could address it since your name is close to Marjorie. You're muted. You're muted.
Basically, she's saying here that Bruria's status as a mother was not referred to.
Okay.
And the side of her that was the I don't know if I can even say rebellious, but the groundbreaking part of what Jewish women can do was more emphasized.
Okay. By the way, do you notice a difference in tone in terms of the two commentaries on this passage? One is male and one is female.
Yeah.
Do you think it makes a difference?
Oh, I think absolutely, because of the way he was just, he was denigrating her. I feel. In terms of, when women speak up, they're bossy, they're this, rather than accomplished and competent and smart and brilliant.
I'm not sure if I agree with that. I know what you're saying, but you think he's denigrating or simply pointing it out that that's how she has to be? It's an interesting comment that you're making.
I think he's a little snarkier than he has to be, actually.
Okay. All right. That's interesting. All right. I myself didn't pick up on that. That's interesting.
And maybe I'm just more sensitive to that, we're so used to all these men, looking down on women for all these. Yes, Geraldine?
I thought he could have changed his attitude in writing about this. I think he could have used different words to,
Okay.
I think he was trying to put it out there, whether it's intentional or not, or he's a victim of her circumstances, that men just did that during that time. But still, I like the other one better. You're called aggressive just because you speak out, and I got a little irritated about that. Because look, being aggressive just because I articulate myself and let you know, and yet the guy next door to me could do that, and you're pals.
Yeah, a man would be called assertive, and she's called aggressive.
Yeah,
for the same type of behavior. Yeah.
Okay, I think what you're pointing out is very important, because I myself was reading it as his understanding that she has to be this way to live in a men's world, whereas for Marjorie, she's accepting that. In other words, she's not apologizing in any way, right, for her behavior. She's simply pointing it out, and without taking away from her in any way or justifying. So I think that it's really very interesting what you noticed. Thank you for that. Okay, so now we finally do come to children. All right, and
okay, before we look at it, I mean, just the fact that we have to even discuss whether or not she has children. Do we ever discuss if the rabbis have children? It's not an issue for the men.
That's right.
But for a woman, it's an issue.
Right.
And that in itself drives me crazy.
Right. By the way, and some of you may remember last year, I think I repeated it more than once, and then I talked about my midrash on exactly on this passage. I wrote my very first midrash on Rani Akara, single barren one, and I saw her as being Miriam. And so I have a midrash, and it's in my book. You can find my book online, and you can read the whole article. But one of the things I dealt with at the end of the book, I didn't refer to this at all. I don't think I even knew about these passages at the time. Maybe I would have referred to them had I known it. But I raised that question, right? Should we be looking at barrenness as as something negative, right? And there's this wonderful midrash with why are so many of our foremothers, right? Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, why are so many of them barren? And in the midrash, it says because God likes to speak to barren women. And if they are barren, they pray to him, asking for children. Isn't that amazing? It's an amazing midrash. I don't remember the source of it, but it's an amazing midrash, which on the one hand is horrible, right? If you think about it. And talking about anthropomorphizing God. Okay. Any other comments before we look at the very, very famous midrash, where we see a very interesting side of Beruria? So
just a quick aside. I'm also in a lecture series on Agnon, and we're just discussed Agadat Sofer, where the wife is barren, and they talk a lot also about this verse and the fact that God wants them to be barren in order to hear the prayers, which is
he's saying that straight out of the midrash.
Agnon Agnon quotes all over the place without giving credit.
I know. So, but he is.
Yeah.
If you could actually send me the reference, that would be interesting.
Okay.
know what I'll do with it, but I think it's the fact that it's well known. I mean, for me, it's well known. I mean, I actually once wrote a paper. I don't think I ever published it. It was called God. Actually, it might be in my collection. God's speaking to women or something like that. And he does speak to women. He speaks to Hagar, right? He speaks to Hagar. Sarah overhears him, right? Or he overhears Sarah. Whether God speaks to her directly, we don't know. And there are cases where Hannah, right? Hannah, who's barren.
Yeah, Rivka.
Rivka goes,
when she's pregnant, he talks to her.
Right. And that's where the word Zoresh, midrash, comes from. She demands, right? She demands to speak to him. Okay, yeah. All right. So let me share the screen. PowerPoint. Okay. So this is, let me see. Actually, I can make it, I have a better summary of it. Let me see where I have a better one. No, okay. This might, I just trying to think what's better. I think this is the original one. Okay, I'll just make it bigger. The midrash is on, the midrash is on Mishlei. Mishlei, what's Mishlei in English?
Proverbs.
It's on Proverbs 31, which is, by the way, Eshet Hayil, all right? Eshet Hayil. So the fact that this is a midrash on Eshet Hayil, the woman who, the woman of valor in itself tells you something. So who's the woman of valor? It's Beruria. Let me make this as big as we can. Would you like to read it, Geraldine? You have to unmute yourself.
Sure. A good wife who can find. It once happened that Rabbi Meir was sitting and lecturing in the house of study on Sabbath afternoon, and his two sons died. What did their mother do? She laid the two of them on the bed and spread a sheet over them. After the departure of the Sabbath, Rabbi Meir came home from the house of study. He said to her, "Where are my two sons?" She said, "They went to the house of study." He said, "I was watching the house of study, and I did not see them." She gave him a cup of Havdalah.
Gave him a cup four Havdalah.
Four Havdalah, and he recited the Havdalah. He again said, "Where are my two sons?" She said to him, "They went to another place and will soon come." She set food before him, and he ate and blessed. After he blessed, she said, "Master, I have a question to ask you." He said to her, "Ask your question." She said to him, "Master, some time ago a man came and gave me something to keep for him. Now he comes and seeks to take it. Shall we return it to him or not?" He said to her, "My daughter, whoever has an object in trust must return it to its owner." She said to him, "Master, I would not have given it to him without your knowledge." What did she do? She took him by the hand and led him up to the room. She led him to the bed and removed the sheet that was on them. When he saw the two of them lying dead on the bed, he began to cry and say, "My sons, my sons." At that time she said to Rabbi Meir, "Master, did you not say to me that I must return the trust to its master?" He said, "The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." Rabbi Hanina said, in this way she comforted him, and his mind was set at ease. Regarding such an instance, does it say, "A good wife who can find"?
Okay, so just.
I remember this. Did we do this before?
No, we didn't.
Okay.
But just breathe in, right? I think this is a summary of this, right? This is a summary of it. which, but it's more or less, it's not exact. But we could look at this, but I thought it would really be worthwhile looking at it very, very carefully. So we have here a dialogue between a husband and wife, okay? First of all, let's start out with where are the people?
They're in their home.
Well, before they're in their home.
Oh, well, he's at the Beit Midrash.
Right. He's outside and she's inside. Okay. What's the time?
Shabbat.
Shabbat. Okay. And you're not supposed to mourn on Shabbat, right? You're not supposed to even get news of something on Shabbat. I still remember one of our closest friends who died in her 50s. She was really, maybe she was definitely less than 60. She must have been in her mid 50s. And we were all in shock, but how did I find out about it? Everyone knew. How did my husband and I find out? Our next door neighbor walked over to our house to tell us, right? We couldn't believe it, to tell you the truth. But I mean, why would he walk over? His wife was at that house where the person died. And he himself was the son of a rabbi, right? So he knew the law, right? He knew the law, but he felt that we, as a rabbinic couple, who was also very close to the woman who died, should know. Okay, I'm just giving you two different points of view. And to this day, I remember that, and I remember his even hesitating, should he have told us or not? And then we basically, sat mourning for the rest of the day. And then the minute Shabbat was over, we went over to the house, right? This was all in Omer. And I bring this to you not to tell you something personal, but that the question is, what's the correct thing to do? Okay. Now, clearly, the one who retells this is praising Beruria. Why? For two things.
She delayed telling him.
Why?
Yeah.
And why is that praising?
Well, now that you're saying that you're not supposed to let somebody know on Shabbat, maybe that was one of the reasons.
Yeah.
And I don't know it just sounds so overwhelming to have two of your sons dead and upstairs. And maybe it also gives her, I'm just saying, maybe it also gives her time to kind of settle her own heart and emotions too.
Okay. What else were your thoughts as I was reading this?
Well, she doesn't just come out with the news. She sets the stage with a parable in order to make it easier for him to accept the deaths.
But when does she do it?
After Shabbat's over, after they've made Havdalah.
Okay, so there's a real dividing line here. All right, you don't see it on this. I could go back to the original because it's much easier to read this. Let me put some little red dots here. Okay, this is okay. This is Shabbat, right? Right, he comes home before reciting the Havdalah prayer. What does that mean, by the way? By the way, is that true in the original? Let me just see. Yeah. Okay. I didn't even notice that when you read it there. Okay, so this is faithful. What does that mean? What does that mean? I want to look at this really carefully, not only to study what kind of person Beruria is, but also to understand something about, what's going on here. Do you see?
In terms of it's important for him to be home to
Okay,
Shabbat?
where he was gone all of Shabbat, right? She was home all alone, right?
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't with her. Do you think that's some sort of criticism here on the part of the rabbis? Where, right? She's associated with the home, right? That's one thing I just want to point out, because very, very often there are critical texts about rabbis who are studying and who are unavailable to their wives, right? There's one very famous one who...
About Yom Kippur?
Right.
I know that it's heartbreaking.
What's the one on Yom Kippur?
Where he was supposed to go home to be with his wife, and he would study to the last minute and never went. And then with her teardrop, it's just
right. And also, I think the ceiling falls in on him.
Or he falls off. No, he falls off the roof or something.
Right. But the
as punishment.
But the irony is, when is he going home? On Yom Kippur.
Yom Kippur, when they can't consummate.
They can't have sex on Yom Kippur, right? So in other words, there's an irony there, okay? And there's other ones like that also. There's Rachumi, and the name Rachumi is like Rechem and Rachum, and there are a whole bunch of them which are sort of critical about the rabbis who are excessive. And don't forget the famous story about of Rabbi Akiva, who neglects his wife for 25 years, even though supposedly she's the one who sends him off to pray.
Oh, yeah.
So this is one point I want to make. So what this means is, not only does she forestall bearing him the awful tidings, but she's alone all day with her pain and grief. Okay? It doesn't say what time they died, but let's assume, that we don't know if it's winter or summer. We don't really know. Okay. So she basically hides the news from him, and basically, sort of only after the complete consummation of Shabbat and serving him food. Okay. Could she have told him earlier? Let's just check to see that that's the case here. 1 minute. Right. They went to another place. Right. She set food before him, and he ate, and he blessed. Okay. All right. So I do want to check that this summary is correct. Why did she? Shabbat is over now. Why doesn't she tell him before? Why wait so long? Now let's try to be a little critical about this. I want you to be a little critical. Here she's being praised clearly, right? But well, I want.
I think maybe she wants him to be, men. Well, I shouldn't say men like food. They like to be fed. We feed them back there. But maybe she wanted him to be satisfied that way before she told him, to be settled and satisfied.
That's an interesting point. In other words, because maybe if she told him right after Shabbat is over, right after the Havdalah, then he would not have an appetite to eat or something. Okay, that's an interesting, I hadn't thought about that. So that's actually praiseworthy. She's taking him into consideration. But meanwhile, by taking him into consideration, she's holding it all to herself, right? She's not sharing with him. And by not sharing with him, she's creating a rift, really. I mean, I'm suffering while you're still enjoying food. And
the way the story presents it, you have to even ask if she's suffering. I mean, she's so task-oriented.
Right.
Like,
Right.
where's her emotion
Where's her exactly?
as a parent?
Right. Where is her emotion? Yes.
But
Right.
you know what it also reminds me of when people who are sick and a family members die and they wait, they don't want to tell them, or they wait to tell them that that person has died. May because of they think they would be too overwhelming at that particular time. Does that make sense?
It
Yeah.
does, definitely. But I want to add another something to this, which you may be angry at me for saying this, but I love to anger people, as you all know. But I'm wondering, by her keeping it to herself for so long, and by not sharing, and it's following up on what you just said, Geraldine, by keeping it to herself, I wonder if she's not, how should I put this? By not sharing, I don't even know how to say this.
Well, she does have control over it. There's a
Okay,
controlling aspect.
she has control. She's the chief mourner, right? She's the focus of the one with the pain, all right? And she's not giving up her being the main mourner at this point. It's all her. I don't know if that makes sense. All right. And I don't know if that's good or bad. I don't know if I'm saying that to denigrate her but there, I think there's something, and Shirley, what you just said before, I think is true. Once you share the news, it's out there.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me even of the people who were told that their loved ones who were hostages in Gaza who had been killed, but until they had the bodies back, you don't give up that little glimmer of hope. So her sons are upstairs. She's covered them. They're dead, but she doesn't say the words out loud. Maybe they can magically come back to life.
Okay, so
Once you've
maybe,
acknowledged it publicly, you give up that hope.
okay, it's a form of denial. It's a form of making it public. And that now, not only will she have to deal with it herself, but she's going to have to now comfort him, right? And tell the world with all that that means, right? They're a prominent couple, all right? But why did you say she's almost cold there? Because look she's still the scholar, right? She's still the scholar here. Here, let me go back to the original text, all right? All right. Now, unlike her, right, she was keeping her sorrow to herself, but unlike Beruria, he cries, my sons, which sounds a little bit like who? Anyone have any associations with this? David over Absalom, right? Who also, when he finds out, and he's waiting to find out, and he has a strong feeling that that's what happened, but till the messenger actually tells him, right? And then he is distraught. It might even be worthwhile looking for that. I won't look at it right now, but to look at it, okay? And then she says what she says. Okay. And what does she do by saying this to him? He's crying. And what does she do to him? By her scholarly answer.
Saying that there's real no reason to cry because we're just doing what you need to do, returning the precious treasure to its owner.
Right. So she's giving him a perspective, but what is she doing at the same time?
In a way, belittling his emotion.
Not belittling it, but I think...
Or dismissing it.
Not
saying it's not valid.
No, she's shutting it. But what you just said is true, but I would add something else. She's also shutting it down. Right? It's like, I think I once shared this with some of you. When my father died, my mother said to me, we're standing at the grave, and she said, you can't cry in public because That's what and this is a horrible thing, but my mother in some ways was really horrible in terms of being somewhat racist. That's what the Sephardim, that's what the lower class people do, crying at funerals, okay? This was my mother, right? I was 31 years old when my father died. So anyway, but there is this feeling of, not crying in public, which today we know it's important to cry, right? We understand that, but she's shutting down his genuine feelings here. So I know I'm being critical. Right?
Yeah, it could be shutting down, but maybe not with the expressed thought of shutting down, but sort of reminding him, that he has this outcry or this cry, but it's okay to have that expression, but also understand that what you said, the Lord gave and the Lord has taken away, so maybe it wasn't to me shutting it down, maybe, but more of, okay, you've expressed this grief outwardly like this, yet remember that what you said and what we talked about earlier. And then his mind was set at ease.
Okay. But when do you say the Lord gave and the Lord has taken away? Blessed be the name of the Lord.
Funerals.
When do you say it?
For Jewish people, I don't know.
You usually say it at the funeral.
That's what I said.
That's what,
funeral.
that's what Toby said.
You said now, right?
No, I said at funeral.
Oh, I didn't hear you. Okay. Okay, at the funeral, right. There's no funeral yet. In other words, now he should be mourning. He should be crying. He should be overwhelmed by this, and not only that, but the two of them should be crying, right? Together. They're now together in the home. Before he was away all day. Now he's home. They're he sees the two of them lying dead. And do you understand what I'm saying? There is something bothers me about this. In other words, she's being praised, but I think that this is like, it's like the British stiff upper lip. It's a little bit too much. I find it very, very difficult and we know today how important mourning is, and we know this is not the sort of thing you should say to anyone who has just lost two sons, right? Don't go saying platitude. This is a sort of platitude to a certain degree. I don't know. Do you agree? Maybe I'm being too critical. And I said you won't like what I have to say. But what are your thoughts about this?
I think they both show very little affect.
Okay. With an A, yes.
A, yes.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. There's a real problem here. And on the one hand, they are praising her, right? They are praising her for being so, brave and whatever. But it is problematic. I haven't really looked to see let me just quickly, I still have it open. Let me see what Marjorie, let me change my search. And what word do you think I should put in there? Sons. So I'll put in two sons. Let's see if we can find that. Yeah, okay, it's right after that. Let's just see what she has to say. And maybe we can continue to discuss it next week, but let me just do the share. Where's her article? Okay. Here we go. It's a later source, right? Here we go. Not until the 8th or 9th century do we find a source referring to the wife of Rabbi Meir as a mother of two sons. But even here we feel the text hedging. I didn't point this out, but I should have. Not only by failing to mention Beruria by name, but also by preferring to highlight her intuitiveness and wisdom as a wife faced with disclosing to her husband that their two sons have died. Okay, all right. maybe we'll come back to this again next week, because I know, Sue, you have to leave and we only have 3 more minutes. So I think maybe I'll make a little marker for myself here in the article. I could probably do that. Underline, okay, and I'll also put a little text in here. Come back, start from here, start, okay. So we'll continue with this text next year. It's a very important text. I've said what I have to say, and you don't have to accept what I'm saying, but I really think that it's a very, very important text, which also I think has to be looked at with modern eyes as well, not only with rabbinic eyes. Yeah, Geraldine?
Well, I understand. I can't help but think of the Baptist ministers and how they use verses like this, that, and they're doing funerals as well, and some of the verses like, I can't remember right offhand, but it just reminds me of that. I have a question about Rachel. Have you talked to her?
With Akiva's wife, Rachel?
No, I'm sorry, our Rachel here. Is it Rachel?
Oh, no, Rachel doesn't come to this class. She comes to the
okay.
Bible class. Yeah.
Yeah, because she said she had an emergency. I just wanted to make sure she was all right.
Okay. No, she has problems. I know what her problems are.
Okay.
Okay. Right. So I'll see you next week. Well, at least one more session with Beruria. I think I'm amazed at the richness, frankly, of these texts that we're looking at. And whoever doesn't show up can either, check it out with the other stuff. Okay, so see you next week. Shabbat shalom.
Thank you, Naomi.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Yeah.